Today I'm going to be talking about shoes. I feel like I've become somewhat of an expert on shoes lately, mostly because I've been working as a delivery driver for almost exactly 3 years now, and I've had a chance to test out all kinds of different shoes, and I walk about 10 to 20,000 steps a day on all kinds of terrain. Not to mention, I do go hiking on the weekends periodically. Not as much as I used to, but I still do it. So here's what I found. So I originally started off with hiking boots, like those heavy leather hiking boots, and also a set of really well-made heavy leather trail running shoes, which had the lower ankle on them. Within about the first 6 months of working as a delivery driver, I sprained my ankle wearing those. And that was while wearing the more supportive hiking boots even. I stepped into some gravel and my foot sank in on one side and it twisted my ankle. It wasn't a bad sprain or anything, but it wasn't very good either. So I decided to look into shoes and see what I could do better, and I came across a lot of anecdotal evidence that minimalist shoes could be the answer to my shoe problem. I should say though that there is not a lot of actual good scientific data out there and not much research done on shoes. A lot of the information about shoes out there are claims made by manufacturers and not necessarily made by the scientific community. The only study that I'm aware of is a study that compared barefoot runners, and those are truly barefoot runners, to people that wore supportive running shoes. And they found that the barefoot runners had fewer injuries to their muscles, ligaments, and bones, things like that. Although they did have more injuries like puncture wounds or damage to your skin. So based on that kind of limited evidence and lots of anecdotal evidence, it has been a popular trend over the last 10-15 years to move towards barefoot running shoes that offer little to no support. They just offer protection for your feet, and that's about it. And so I actually tried wearing these shoes, and they have been great. And I have kind of settled on the shoes that I wear most of the time. So I wanted to share that with you. So my first shoe is this Whitin barefoot running shoe. I have tried a couple of different styles of barefoot running shoes, and most of the shoes that you see on the market out there are very minimalist. And the problem that I have with those is first off, they're not generally waterproof, which is a problem in the Pacific Northwest here. Another problem is that the soles tend to not be all that grippy. Although I'm sure there are exceptions out there, I did find myself slipping more. Having said that, wearing a barefoot shoe and slipping isn't as big of a deal. Feel like you have a lot more control. Having said that, I needed something with a little bit more tread depth and something to protect me from sharp rocks. A lot of people have gravel driveways in this area, and those driveways are sometimes populated by extremely sharp rocks, which made running to their front door a little bit painful. So I wanted something with a lot more grip, a little bit thicker sole, and otherwise just staying minimalist. And so that's why I bought these Whitin running shoes. The tread on these shoes is very aggressive, it is very grippy, but it is still extremely flexible and doesn't offer much support. They fit like a glove, like almost literally. These laces on the front do almost nothing, and it stretches over your feet more like a slipper. Having said that, having these laces on the front does make this look like a presentable shoe so you don't get kicked out of restaurants. I bought these for about $35. I'm not sure what they're going for now, but this is about my fourth pair of shoes. And they last a long time. One thing I found about barefoot shoes is that they do tend to last a long time. Before, when I was wearing regular shoes as a delivery driver, I was getting at best 2-3 months. When I switched to barefoot shoes, I was getting closer to 6. And that's mostly because the only real place where they wear out is on soles. The tread pattern will wear out, and eventually it'll actually wear entirely through the shoe, and then your foot's basically touching the ground. I would basically wear them until there is a hole in the bottom of them. I found with more traditional shoes that the soles will slowly collapse, the cushioning will distort, things like that, and so they do become more uncomfortable over time. They don't support your feet properly over time, and if you're like me and don't really have any problems with your feet, then wearing a shoe without support is probably okay. And so I've had really good luck with the wear on these. So probably my favorite thing about these is that they are extremely lightweight. When you're walking a lot and having to walk quickly like you are as a delivery driver, you find that having heavy shoes is just more of a burden than anything. Most of the delivery drivers that I've ever talked to eventually switch to lightweight running shoes of some sort. They tend to stay away from the heavier shoes because it slows them down a lot. And it's very exhausting wearing heavy shoes. So the lightweight, durability, and in this case low price really sell these shoes well. I should also say that these shoes are waterproof. I haven't had any problems with water getting in them unless I'm stepping in a really deep puddle. I haven't had any problems with water getting in these except over the sides of the shoe. The only downsides that I've ever had with these is that they are very cold in the winter. They offer absolutely no insulation, and even with thick socks on, they are still very cold. So wearing them in the snow, I've done it. It's not pleasant though. I don't recommend it. Also, things like water, sticks, small rocks, things like that will get into the shoe, and especially working as a delivery driver, once the inside of your shoe is wet, it will stay wet all day. And so having a little bit higher heel would be helpful. So that's why I decided to venture out and buy my second pair of shoes. My second pair of shoes are the Xero Xcursion Fusion hiking boots. I believe these are selling for about $150 right now, but I actually got a really good deal on them. They were having like a 50% off sale back in, I think it was October or something like that. It took a while for them to actually get my shoes out to me. It wasn't entirely Xero's fault, but it did take about 2 months for me to actually get my shoes. And so I've been wearing these for about 4 or 5 months as well, working as a delivery driver, and they've held up exceptionally well. So like other minimalist shoes, these are extremely lightweight. They are probably the lightest weight hiking boot you can buy. Xero claims that these are 100% waterproof. That has not been my experience, and I think lots of reviews also would agree with me that these shoes are more extremely water resistant. So if you are walking through lots of puddles and things like that on really wet days, your feet will get wet. However, it keeps the rain off your feet, and for about 90% of the time, even here in the rainy Pacific Northwest, these will keep your feet dry. So it's not 100% waterproof, but it's not that bad either. This does feel and look more like a traditional shoe. It is flexible, a lot more flexible than a standard hiking boot, but it isn't as flexible as other barefoot running shoes. The tread on the bottom is fairly aggressive. It has these interesting lugs on them, and it's a pretty decent pattern. I haven't had too much of a problem with it. They're not quite as grippy as my other shoes, but they are still reasonably grippy. I know when I first bought them, and I know a lot of other reviewers have commented on this, the soles of the shoes look like they are shiny hard plastic, and they still sound like kind of hard plastic after wearing them for 4 or 5 months. Once you've worn these quite a few miles and have properly broken them in, they actually feel more like a barefoot shoe. They don't quite allow you to feel the ground, and you can't really grab onto things with your feet like you can with a regular barefoot shoe, but they are still pretty decent, and they protect you from sharper rocks than the Whitin trail running shoes that I have. They do have just standard laces on them. These are kind of elastic round laces, which, as with all elastics, they kind of lose their elasticity over time, and so they started out being really easy to tie, and they stay tied really nicely, but over time, as they've gotten stretched out and gotten stiffer, they don't really stay tied that well anymore. So I might actually consider replacing the shoelaces, but these shoes are getting close to the end of their life, so I'll probably just deal with it until the rest of the shoe finally dies. So like I mentioned before, I have had these for about 4 or 5 months, and you can see the tread on the bottom of them has worn very nicely, actually. I still have a little bit of tread left, so if I had stayed working as a delivery driver, I probably would have gotten another about 2 months out of these shoes. 2, maybe 3 months. They seem to be wearing a little bit better than my Whitin shoes, but the difference is kind of minimal. The lugs do seem to be softer than the rest of the sole of the shoe, and so I expect once I wear through the lugs, the traction is probably not going to be that great anymore, but the shoe will be otherwise completely worn out at that point, so I'm not too worried about that. They do wear very, very well. The question I had when I bought these is whether or not they are worth their price. A decent set of really nice leather hiking boots these days, the more traditional heavy kind, those tend to run closer to $200 from what I've seen, and the normal asking price for these is about $150. There really isn't any competition for these shoes. All the other hiking boots out there are way heavier, they're a lot stiffer, they're a lot more cushioned. So if you're looking for a relatively inexpensive barefoot hiking boot, then this is really the only option you have out there in this price range. I think there are some similarly lightweight, but with leather construction and a lot heavier duty construction, hiking boots out there, but they are like twice the price of these shoes. And while those might last as long, I personally can't afford, $250, $300 pair of boots. These also have a lot more insulation than regular barefoot shoes, which is good in the winter. They do sell a very specific winter hiking boot for really cold conditions, and I don't know much about that, but I believe it has the same sole on it, so it's probably pretty similar, just with more insulation and probably a little bit more waterproof would be my guess. And that's what it looks like from the pictures anyways. So to answer the question of whether these are worth it, I don't think you have any other options, honestly, for a kind of barefoot, lightweight hiking boot like this. Just no one else makes them, especially in these lower price ranges. So I think I ended up coming out to like $75 with shipping, something like that, when I bought these, and when they were on sale. And for that price, it's no question these are absolutely worth it. At $150, I think it's kind of hard for a lot of people to justify them, but in my experience, I think they actually are worth it. And Xero Shoes is a pretty cool company. The owners seem to be very active on social media, so they have kind of increased the hype around barefoot shoes and especially these types of barefoot hiking boots. There just isn't anyone else making anything like this. These actually do live up to their advertising, so it's cool that there's a company like Xero out there making these shoes, and I hope to see more of them.